so many people I hear ask the question, how do I get into motorsports? It's just a matter of like getting online and doing a tiny bit of research. It sets itself apart because, you don't have to bring any funding, period, in order to race it. We went through like a 3-day evaluation thing originally where there was 60 of the best women around the world invited to this. This will make you very sad. So 99.6% of sports sponsorship a year goes to men and 0.4 goes to women. It's not like every male driver makes it through, therefore every female driver won't make it through. It's kind of like a numbers game. Having, where it's just the women are only staying in W Series, then that's not, that's not what W Series originally was created to do.
Welcome to episode 6 of the Summer Shutdown series on Stripping the Dipping. You're joined by your usual co-host, AMG Dent, aka Denzel Clarkson. And we're very excited to bring you this episode because, it's great when we get to speak to drivers, and even greater when we get to speak to the great minds such as the mechanical engineers behind them. But what if we could interview someone that was awesome enough to do both? So without further delay, I'm very, very, very excited to have a guest which kind of covers both bases and has driven in the W Series as well. It's the awesome Sabre Cook. Sabre, how are you keeping and what have you been up to so far during the summer break?
Well, for us, it's not so much of a summer break, I guess. We still have lots of racing happening over here in the US. So yeah, we just got finished with the Nashville round for Indycar actually. So still going here.
Oh, well, I can imagine, and that Nashville race as well is really crazy in terms of the IndyCar. Just on the last lap between Scott Dixon and Scott McLaughlin as well. It was so crazy. And then the multiple amount of cautions that came up too. But we'll get on to the IndyCar side of things probably later in the segment, Sabra. How I like to always start off these podcasts is just by finding out more about our guests, getting insight, into their earliest motorsport related memories. And for you, Sabre, growing up in Grand Junction, Colorado, could you kind of give us some insight into some of your earliest motorsport memories? And we know that you've been racing from the age of 10 and that your dad used to professionally race and ride in the Motorcross series. What influence would you say that he had on your early career as well?
Yeah, he definitely had a big influence, obviously, on our involvement into motorsports initially. And he and my mother didn't want my brother and I racing motorcycles. So the next logical thing was karting, and was really lucky to have his and my mom's support to do that. And started from, I drove for the first time when I was probably 8, and then started taking more seriously when I was 10, and then grew up karting and running around the go-kart track for many years, and went on to have some awesome success and a few national championships and world championships, and then was able to finally get enough sponsorship to move to cars in 2017. But definitely spent the majority of my life karting, so it was a great time.
We could imagine. And you mentioned there as well that it was you and your brother. Like, how competitive are you guys, like, as siblings? And also, does he like drive professionally as well?
No, we're very different. He can be competitive just in different ways. But he stopped driving, maybe when he was 13, I would say. So it's been a while since he's raced. But yeah, he does his own thing, and I still do the racing.
Well, it's good that you're doing it for the legacy of the family. And, it's really cool as well just to kind of have that dynamic in a family kind of sense too. So that's great. And we'll definitely explore that more. And something else we wanted to talk about, Sabre, was we also know that you're a very bright mechanical engineer graduate. What were your favorite modules and subtopics when you were learning and studying the course? And another kind of like, I guess, question to add on top of that is, how transferable would you say the degree has been in relation to your approach to things like car setup, telemetry analysis, and just your communication, between yourself and your, like, for example, team members and engineers and stuff like that as well?
I think some things have been transferable, like classes that I really enjoyed. I had a more like hands-on design, like make your project type thing in high school, and then in college, which is I guess university for you guys, that I took like a lot of fluids classes, and we actually ended up having I think we called it automotive dynamics is what they ended up calling it. It was like a one-off class that some of the professors came together and put on, which was really cool. But the majority of my degree, you know, was very much like very general mechanical, so not motorsports. So you don't really get taught how to look at data analysis in regards to racing. So most of my data analysis experience actually comes from learning it as I grew up with karting. But obviously the school side of things taught you like the principles behind everything as to why you kind of make the decisions that you make and why the math or science works out behind it. And then as far as, sorry, I forgot the last part of your question. There was a lot of it.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's just as well as that, just you know, in terms of communication with like your team members and car setup as well. Does that also play a role into it?
Communication wise, we did have a class that we took our final year. It's called senior design. And so we have to work within a group of engineers, and we completely design, build, and then present an engineering project from beginning to end. So I guess that was a really great class to learn how to communicate, you know, as a team with other engineers and be able to keep up on our project deadlines. So that class would have probably been the most beneficial. But as far as real communication within the motorsports team atmosphere, I think I was lucky that I learned that dynamic, especially coming from the driver's side too, as I grew up through motorsports.
Absolutely, absolutely, Sabre. And that's another question in relation to this too. Like, what initially inspired you to kind of study mechanical engineering? And you know, you mentioned that there were various projects you had to do throughout your course. Was there one in particular that you're really proud of, or one that you found really interesting that you know you'd like to share with our viewers?
A specific project. Oh, I don't know. I guess the one that made me decide I wanted to be an engineer would probably, I'd say mechanical. I knew I wanted to be some sort of engineer because I really enjoyed math and science from a young age. So that was kind of a normal path. But then I took the mechanical engineering class in high school. And like I said, I got to do some more hands-on work there and really enjoyed it. In our senior design course, though, in university, we did end up designing and building a 1/3 scale water air stopper flow model. So it's for continuous steel casting. And so we actually ended up doing CFD on the stopper rod design because there's a big need in this industry in order to effectively basically stop the flow in order to not get air stuck in the steel. So I guess that would probably be the most exciting one in my undergraduate career.
Wow, that's so fascinating, Sabra. And again, I think, you know, it's so intriguing just to kind of see how diverse kind of your approach has been with your career and kind of the studying that you've done as well. And actually to see that although it's not necessarily like a motorsport course in itself, there's still a lot of principles and aspects of it which are quite similar or transferable. You even mentioned like the CFD, which a lot of Formula One teams and motorsport teams use as well for the development of new components and stuff like that as well. So really interesting. And on the topic of exciting things as well, Sabre, I think another thing that, you know, we probably need to talk about on the podcast too and to celebrate is another remarkable achievement you made in becoming the 2018 global winner of the Infinity Engineering Academy as well, which is marvelous. You know, could you enlighten our viewers as to what the program entailed and what was your highlight of achieving such a prestigious award?
Yeah, so it's a global engineering competition. So it's between 7 regions, and I was blessed to win the U.S. region, and it goes through a series of competitions where it's like you take a literally an engineering exam, you do interviews, you do group challenges, and then there's 3 of us that would make it to the final day, and we actually got to do a technical challenge on pit lane in the Renault garage. So that was really, really neat. And then based off of that, in our interactions with the judges and with explaining our justifications and how we went about the challenge, they chose one of us to win, which then selected me to have the opportunity to work for Infinity Global. And then I worked as a vehicle test engineer. And then after that, I went and worked for Renault F1 as a suspension composite design engineer. So it's super awesome. I don't know how much the program is running since COVID. I think they had that they had kids that went in during the COVID year, and I'm a little worried that it kind of maybe got disrupted by all of that. But
Sure.
It was a great program to be a part of while it was going on.
Absolutely, Sabre. And whilst we're on the topic of talking about, really cool competitions or kind of academies or programs like this as well, for the younger listeners out there too, that, might still be at university or they're in what we call secondary school, I think high school for you guys, and looking to kind of make the jump up. How important is taking advantage or utilizing programs like that? Because I think there's always things like this out there, but often or not, it doesn't necessarily get, circulated or kind of publicized the way it should. And I feel like, a lot of great potential people that may have the skill or the knowledge or the ability or creativity to do stuff like this sometimes miss out. So how important is it for people to kind of take something like this on board and to have a go?
Yeah, I think if you have the option to be a part of a program like this, it's just like the driver development programs. If you can be a part of something like that, then it's always really beneficial. And there's a lot more of them going on than most people realize. And so many people I hear ask the question, how do I get into motorsports? It's just a matter of getting online and doing a tiny bit of research. And there's tons of internships, jobs for, there's, I think it's Glassdoor, motorsportsjobs.com. You can go onto F1 website and they provide a lot of resources, or any of the team's websites provide a lot of resources. And more of them are providing academies for engineers to come into. So the resources are definitely growing, and I definitely recommend any students out there interested in a way into the sport to check those out.
Oh, definitely, Sabre. And I'm so glad that you kind of explained that to us as well, because I think for a lot of kids, a lot of parents as well, especially after COVID, which we'll touch on in a couple of questions time as well, it felt like there was a huge cloud over people's head, and it's just like, what am I going to do now? Or what's available? Or where do I go from here? And kind of listening to what you've just said there as well, there still is a lot of hope. There still is a lot of opportunities. Things are starting to kind of go back to normal. A lot of things are on the up, and in a world where things are always expanding, growing, changing, developing, there's always a need for the next set of mechanical engineers, next set of mechanics, next set of, drivers, etc., etc. So it's very reassuring to hear that from yourself. And I'm sure a lot of parents and also students would take comfort in that response as well. So thank you. And kind of to touch on a different subject, because we haven't got so much into the racing so far. And before we get into W Series, we know that you raced in various other single series series, such as the USF 2000 series, the SCCA, the Sports Car Club of America, as well. You even did some Formula 4 United States Championship racing as well, which is super awesome. The question is, Sabre, how did you go about preparing yourself for these series? Because they're all intrinsically different in terms of the chassis of the car, the tire model or the tires, for example, the opposition as well in such a competitive field. And which one would you say was your favorite out of those earlier single seater series?
I guess as far as preparation goes, I've learned a lot now that I would have changed my approach. But at the time, all you can do is, you watch onboard videos, you research the track, you research, how the lap times have looked, what the evolution of the race weekend has looked like in past events. You look at data if you have any from past events. And then obviously the best thing would be is to jump on a sim, drive the track as much as you can, and if you have the budget to do so, obviously go and test on those tracks before you race them. And then it's a matter of obviously staying in really good shape and making sure you're doing your physical conditioning outside of the car, and then really preparing with your cognitive and reaction training as well. I say those would be the overarching things to focus on. And then as far as what was my favorite, I mean, I guess Indy Pro 2000 isn't really, it is a junior formula, but it's not one of the first steps. I would definitely say that car was the most enjoyable to race in.
Oh, okay. And just in relation to the Indy Pro car, Sabre, was it in relation to like it having more power? Was it a car that had more like aero emphasis as well? Could you talk about like the nature and characteristics of driving that particular car on the limit as well?
So for the Indy Pro, I guess I think I need a reference. So like comparatively to the W Series car, it's lighter. And we tend to run like the W Series cars a bit higher in ride heights to spare the chassis. So the Indy Pro tended to ideally would have a lower center of gravity. And I mean, they were on average just a lot more nimble through the corners than like the Formula Regional cars are. So it's super fun to drive. It's very, very quick. And you could be quite aggressive with it, I guess. And like the amount of rolling speed that you can take through the corners it's pretty amazing with the Cooper tire compound combined with the aero that is on the Tatis for the Indy Pro.
Absolutely. And another kind of thing I wanted to get your kind of comparative perspective on as well, Sabre, is you mentioned how even this sim racing has become, or being in the sim as well, is like create a thing to allow, you know, drivers to kind of get like a first insight into learning a circuit and getting a feel generally of like, you know, the way the circuit is, any bumps, any kind of things that they need to avoid or kind of like push the emphasis on. How closely, in your perspective, do you think things like iRacing and like more consumer focused like sims, would you say, come close to the real life thing? Because I know on iRacing, there's definitely like an Indy Pro simulated car as well. There's also like a full spec Indycar with like a modeled kind of Dallara like chassis. From your perspective, how realistic or how close do you see the sim world in relation to driving it in real life?
I think it's getting better all the time. And I think the Sims, how realistic it feels really depends on what kind of wheel, pedals, and steering motor that you have. So the more realistic those tools are, the more realistic it's going to feel for you. So if you can get on a on a setup that doesn't really have very much feedback and maybe has really light pedals, it's not going to feel super accurate. So it is definitely worth investing in those bits of kit that are very, very realistic and close to the same thing. And even getting like a wheel that is similar to the one you're actually going to be driving in the car can be important. So yeah, I think every little bit of the environment that you can duplicate will make that experience that much more real. Obviously, nothing is perfect with the physics and with the car models sometimes. And I even sometimes they won't even let you change the model exactly to what the setup of the car is being ran by a team. So then it fails tech and won't let you drive it, which is a little bit annoying. But yeah, I think it's very, very useful, and it's getting to be more of a powerful tool every single day.
That's so exciting. And, for like a fellow sim racer like me as well, I do it more casually, must I say. It's a nice kind of tool and it's really fun. As you're mentioning as well, like when it comes to motor racing, there's quite a big kind of like socio-economic kind of aspect of it in terms of being able to go to the track and find the funding, to do laps and to get a team and to get mechanics and stuff to prepare a car there to test and to race and compete as well. But when you're on like the sim, there's like a set kind of like amount it costs, and basically, like you mentioned there as well, if you want to get like the most expensive pedals, or you want to upgrade the wheel, or you want to like change the kind of like the wheelbase to give you a stronger sense of force feedback as well, then I guess those are more cost effective measures as opposed to going on the circuit. But then, like you also mentioned too, there's no substitute for real life racing as well. So there's
Yeah.
always a kind of balance, definitely. Well, to kind of touch on a different subject as well there, Sabre. I mean, and I'm really glad that you mentioned it too in one of the earlier answers you gave us, was we know that COVID-19 took the world by storm and it had huge ramifications on the world of motorsport, teams and drivers. What did you do during this time to keep yourself kind of physically and mentally engaged, with the racing and also with your family too?
Yeah, I was at the time. We were just, getting ready to kick off the W Series season. I think we had just come back from our training, like sort of training camps type situation in February, and we were literally on track for the first Indy Pro race and getting ready to go out for our first practice session at St. Pete in Florida, and they completely shut down the event. So things changed quite a lot. Everybody went home, and I went back to Colorado to stay with my family there. And I was super lucky that that is where I ended up for the majority of it, because there is a go-kart track there that my family they own, and it's awesome because I could go out there and there's nobody else out there, so it was completely COVID safe, and it was outside, so I could easily go out there and work on things or drive as well, if they allowed us to be open. So that was very beneficial during the whole shutdown, to have that type of resource. And then once we started to open up more, it was great to have a certain amount of people could come to the track, and we could still hold our driving schools and work with the young karters that were there. So that was great. And then trying to, if we can get outside and be active and still go on the beautiful hikes and, biking trails in Colorado, that was something I definitely took advantage of. And then later on, I actually went and worked as a coach in Mexico for a good bit of 2020 as well. So that kind of ended up changing the original plan for 2020. I did do a couple Indy Pro 2000 races. But yeah, it was not the year anyone had in mind, but that's how I managed to pass the time, was actually fostering and building others' development and trying to pass along the knowledge that I've had through the years.
Oh, that's amazing, Sabre. And I think as well, like you mentioned too, like using the opportunity to kind of help other people, to kind of help progress them, it must be really rewarding in that sense, know that, your skills and knowledge been kind of passed on to somebody else, and that they can kind of use that in their day-to-day lives as well. And also, like you mentioned too, rather than like sitting at home and kind of moping about it, or, not doing anything, you're a perfect example of someone that was positive, that tried to be very kind of creative and productive throughout your time, and basically kind of turned like lemons into lemonade in such a kind of cliche way. So it's amazing. And one earlier thing you mentioned as well there, Sabre, is just like how intense the physical preparation is, for a championship, and taking part in a training camp in Portugal and doing stuff like this as well. Could you give our viewers this kind of an insight into how that works out? What like a day-to-day kind of training regime would look like to get yourself in a physical prep for a season, and how important is it to train those neck muscles and stuff like that as well, with the amount of G's and loads that the cars produce throughout the corners?
Yeah, I guess it depends on like what physical level you're starting from as to what your program will obviously look like. But like as an example, let's say like for me right now, I am coming back from a surgery, so it is toned down comparatively. But like in the morning, so like today I got up and I went to Pit Fit, that's here in Indianapolis, which is amazing because I've never lived somewhere where there's a specific driver training gym. So definitely taking advantage of that. But you go there 7 a.m., spend about 2 hours, and then come home, refuel your body, eat the right things. And during those sessions, like it just depends. It depends on like what your goal is specifically for that training block. But usually, you have like a strength day and usually when we do strength, we kind of tend to do full body. We don't really isolate like, body builders will do, where it's like, oh, it's just chest day or something like that. We do more full body, and then there will usually be like some intervals, upper body intervals at the end of the session. And then make sure we take time to stretch and recover before after session. And then also like maybe the next day would be like tomorrow for me is like cardio output intervals. And so I'll do that for like a certain period of time, usually at least over 45 minutes, and then do neck training afterwards, and then like cognitive reaction training after that. And so you kind of like alternate those days, and then you can always have like, if you have extra time or you want to do it, you can do some reaction training, jump on the sim. It just kind of depends on what your goal is, I guess, during those specific training periods. And you can always like have a more deload period where maybe you're going into the season, so maybe you'll reduce like the amount of intensity or maybe the amount of weight you're actually lifting, and then you'll just go to maintaining. Or say you're trying to gain mass, you're going to really change the amount of reps, you're going to change the tempo that you're going at, and you'll change the frequency in which you train, and you'll probably intake more protein. So in some ways it's very, very typical to most other sports, but we do have like quirky things added in that normally other athletes don't do, like the neck training or certain shoulder exercises and the reaction training.
Of course, and like you mentioned there as well, like it's very interesting to actually hear the quirks and kind of the stuff that you guys have to do that's different. And Georgina's been blowing me up in the DMs as well. They're saying that we've actually got Jim Leo, which she says is the owner of the Pit Fit crew. I'm gonna just hang her to dry in case that's not the case. I'm sure it is, So it's just interesting just to see how all encompassing it is and how actually everything interacts with each other. And there seems to be more of an actual, like, how should I say it, like a kind of more kind of like strongly developed training procedure, for drivers as well, which is super cool to kind of hear as well. And to go on to a different topic as well, Sabre, I'm gonna set the scene here because we're gonna get really deep with this podcast now. So I'm gonna buckle
Okay.
up. Let's set the scene. So let's say some aliens land on planet Earth, and E.T. and his gang of friends swamp the track, and they see some really badass women drivers racing in a really cool series called W Series. I love it. And then they put you forward, Sabre, to explain to them what the W Series means to you and what makes it so different from any other spec racing series. I'll let you go.
The W Series to me speaks to, it's a great opportunity, and it's sets itself apart because, you don't have to bring any funding, period, in order to race in it. You just have to qualify and prove that you deserve a seat in the series and that you're one of the fastest, and that will secure you a seat. So in that regard, most motorsports doesn't have that. A lot of it is all pay to play. So that in that respect, it's absolutely amazing from a driver's view, as well as, most spec series, like let's say a junior formula, like say that's F4. Yeah, it's a spec series, a spec engine and car, but they're all ran by different teams. And with W Series, it's all ran by W Series team themselves. So in that regard, it's very transparent. You always have access to anyone's data that you want to look at. So it's very helpful. And they also are keen to provide you with a lot of other resources, whether that's like they have sims that you can come get on if you want to, like during the weekend, which a lot of other series don't always have. And they did provide a lot of training resources, especially the first few years, with HINSA and ESP. And we also we have our own physios like on track that are there to take care of all of our injuries. And so that's really amazing. So I guess those are the things that initially come to mind that, you wouldn't get anywhere else.
Wow. That is super insightful, Sabre. And it's interesting. You touched on quite a few like gems of this amazing stuff. I think isn't like general knowledge to a lot of us. So thank you, for expressing that. But also to kind of delve into some of those things a bit deeper as well. You mentioned that it's not a series where like one needs funding. It's just through like qualifying for the series itself. Like, but how does one qualify for the W series? And also, could you talk about like how the socio-economical aspect of motor racing inherently can sometimes also be like a barrier to progression?
Oh wow, okay.
I know.
It's okay. Wait, now I forgot the first part of the question. It
It's
was
fine. So yeah, the first one was just about like how you qualify for
how
the
you
W
qualify.
series.
That's what it was. Okay. So qualifying for W Series, so I was one of the, let's call it the OGs, the ones that started, the first season. So we went through like a 3-day evaluation thing originally, where there was 60 of the best women around the world invited to this. Then they made us go through driving evaluations, fitness evaluations, team like cognitive challenge evaluations, anything you can imagine. We were tried on, and then they took our like just like objective scores from whoever was the fastest, and that fastest half of us went to the next round. And then we actually got to drive the W Series cars in an event at Almeria. The first evaluation was in Austria, and then months later was another one in Almeria, Spain. So we actually got to drive the cars on track, and were evaluated for like obviously our speed and consistency, minimizing mistakes. And so then initially the 12 fastest of us were selected early on, and then the rest of the girls had to shoot out for the last day for the last 6 spots, and then we had 2 reserve. So that's how we did it the first year. And then the second year, obviously COVID happened, but there were other new girls that got brought into the series because it was only the top 12 that qualified automatically for the next year. So to get those new 6, they did some evaluation events, I think in the UK. They did like sim evaluations, and then they did testing as well in the W Series cars. And that's how they ended up choosing. I actually think they went back to Almeria, and that's how they ended up choosing the new 6 to replace the ones that didn't qualify. And then it gets more complicated because it changes again the next year. So what they did is they kind of got, I think they were looking for very, newer, fresher faces. So they got kind of recommendations from all over the world of like, who's really young and needs, more experience and would really benefit from being put in W Series to get that next step exposure. And so they brought a lot of very young girls in and evaluated them on sim and everything. They had actually did an evaluation here in the States, in Texas, and did an evaluation in F4 cars. And then they chose the new girls based on that. And I think it was only the top 8 from last year that automatically qualified. So they picked some girls that were, had been there since the beginning, and then they picked the new girls from that evaluation in Texas. So I guess the short version is, in order to get in, you need to reach out to W Series through the website, through the contact. There is a contact form, and say that you would like to apply. They will take your application into account, and then they decide based on that, on your resume, basically, whether they will invite you to the evaluation event.
Absolutely. And it's so awesome just to see that even with the W series, although you still have to kind of get there on merit, and like you said, there's lots of evaluative tests just to ensure, that it's the best of the best that get through and get to that stage where they're racing in such a highly regarded series now, and one that's coming to the forefront too. But like you mentioned as well, I just think it's so awesome that it's a series where actually you don't have to. There's no emphasis so much on the funding, and actually I'll reserve that question a bit later because I know that there's some other stuff that we can get into in relation to finding sponsorship and kind of things along that line as well. But also as well, Sabra, I have to ask you the question too. what gaps do you feel need to be bridged to enable women to have a more fairer chance in progressing in series like Formula One at the moment?
I mean, there's a few issues that are contributing to the problem.
Mhm.
One is that less girls start, therefore less girls finish. It's hard to be a race car driver, period. But it makes it a heck of a lot harder when there's less of us starting, at the grassroots levels in karting. It's not like every male driver makes it through, therefore every female driver won't make it through. It's kind of like a numbers game. So I guess one part of it would be families, like letting their young girls, not just their young boys, give them the chance to go and try that out and be a part of that. And then the other problem is, this will make you very sad. So 99.6% of sports sponsorship a year goes to men, and 0.4 goes to women. And then, like, the numbers or something like that was something crazy I saw in an article last week, where it was like 497 billion was spent on men's sports, and like it was like 1 billion was spent on women's sports.
Wow.
So it's pretty sad. That's obviously a big problem. But what I really hope that corporations will realize is that I get the argument where they're like, yes, women's sports, they don't have as many eyes on them, so therefore we can't, we don't have the amount of sponsorship they don't invest as much in those. But
Sure.
motorsports is male and female. It has all the eyes from the men's sports on it. But you have the benefit of investing in a female and getting more attention and exposure by being involved with her program, but you're also in front of the male and female demographic. So it's a pretty great situation to be a part of. And I mean, we saw that with, I don't like using this example, but with Danica, she did a lot of good for women in a lot of ways, because she brought attention that, there was a female that could compete with the men, and she brought a lot of exposure to the sport because and people seem to forget that. So hopefully we've got to put more pressure on companies to take and put those investments in young women coming up to kind of bridge those gaps.
Absolutely, Sabre. And, I think you gave such a sophisticated and also diligent answer there as well. I think, a lot of people listening and, business owners can take away quite a lot from what you just said there as well. And even the statistics you mentioned there as well are so shocking. Like, it's actually quite severe when you actually look at it on that scale, and to see that there's such a gap and still so much work that needs to be done. But thankfully, because of pioneers like yourself, obviously series and organizations like the W Series and loads of other people, you've also just mentioned Danica Patrick, which is an amazing driver, and what she stands for as well, and her input, her views, just her success as well, I think kind of marches things in the right direction. And on the topic of which as well, Sabre, like, where do you see the future of the W Series going in the future? And even for yourself, like, what were the biggest obstacles you've experienced so far, and how did you go about like going through them, or trying to get around them?
For the W Series, I mean, I hope that they can start making the prize money more substantial, so it's actually enough for the winner to move into the next level without having to go and find at least double of what they've won, in W Series. It would be really great to see the likes of, Jamie, Alice, Emma, with how experienced they all are. They really should be in another category at this point, and I think they could do well in those other categories. So I think the future of W Series, I want to say, kind of depends on their ability to push talent forward in the ladder, because if they keep kind of just having, where it's just the women are only staying in W Series, then that's not, that's not what W Series originally was created to do. They wanted to create it as a bridge to those other higher levels. So I really hope that that's what happens. It would be amazing, but I guess we will see with time.
Absolutely, and I think that's a really solid response there as well, Sabre. And on a lighter note, because we've actually got some fan questions in as well, what's on the topic and theme of the W Series as well, Sabre. One of the questions is like, what's the atmosphere like between yourself and your other fellow drivers on the grid? We seen in IndyCar, for example, last week, a bit of fisticuffs between Roman Grosjean and Joseph Newgarden, and even in Formula One, like, I guess teams and drivers can be a bit tribal and a bit cliquey. What's the general kind of like atmosphere between and relationship between, like, yourself and the other drivers too on the grid?
I think, like, especially the first couple years, we were all extremely close. And it's very different again, and that is another one of the differences. There we go. Is the fact that with W Series, we're all traveling together, we're sharing rental cars with each other. It's almost like, we're all in this, we're all part of the W Series team together. So, we're required to interact with each other and be cordial with each other, because, that is part of the shared space. So it's most of us, I think, get along perfectly well, and we respect each other's boundaries. There are sometimes there are disagreements, but for the most part, I think that they've all been handled pretty well, and everybody seems to, for the most part, get along.
Awesome. And another fan question we've had in as well, Sabra, just kind of in relation to you as well. In terms of like you and racing and kind of your driver kind of like personality as well, do you have any like pre-race rituals or anything quirky that you do before a race, before stepping into the car? Because we've had a few bland responses from some other drivers. So I was like, we got Sabra. I hope that there's going to be something quirky or something a bit different that she does that's unique to others. So is there, for example?
I know there's one thing that is really quirky, and I know Abby Eaton and I do the same thing. This sounds strange, but there will be a specific bathroom stall that we will use all weekend. Like, that's the one that you always go to. I don't know why. Don't ask me why. It's just how it is. And then I always put my right shoe and my right glove on first, usually. And then obviously pre-ritual stuff that I do is warming up, sometimes with music, just depending, and then doing reaction stuff beforehand. I think that helps me get into the right headspace before I get in the car.
Absolutely, getting into the zone as well, pre-race as well, is such a thing I think people would almost take for granted on the outside when it comes to like settling in and getting the nerves kind of calmed and kind of putting your focus, towards the end goal. But also for yourself, Sabre, like, which 2 or 3 artists or songs, or you can just give us an example of any song, do you always listen to on the playlist before a race?
Uh, it
Do you have any
depends on
particular artists?
sorry, say it again.
I was gonna say, did you have any particular artists or like particular genres that you're really fond of?
It sometimes it depends on like my mood and what I know I need to do. Like, sometimes I can literally listen to classical music before, or I'll be listening to, like, rap. But I actually have like a playlist that I created on Spotify, and it's called Kick Ass. So I usually shuffle that, put that on shuffle, and that's whatever comes up on there. Usually one of them is motivational enough for me. But it could be old school. It could be what's the one song by Dream On by Aerosmith. I remember I used to love that as a kid.
Ooh, that's amazing.
Sum 41,
What's
Fat
my age
Lip.
again? Ooh, Fat Lip's great as well. Yep.
Yeah. I used to love that as well. So yeah, I don't know. It just kind of depends on where my head is at and what reframing I need to do for the next session, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely, and also great musical taste. If I must say so myself, there, Sabre, you rock. That's awesome. Um, a further question we just wanted to get into as well, Sabre, because again, I feel like people would do a lot of podcasts out there, and the questions are usually quite samey or quite along the same kind of themes. With this podcast, we always try to go into the things where, like, people can learn a lot, or things where, like, I guess they don't probably get as much limelight as they should. Kind of segueing into the question, we know a big element of motorsport is, the element of securing sponsorship and being able to like source funding to race for our entire season two. For yourself, Sabre, how did you go about like, trying to secure the sponsorship, to like run in such expensive series or especially with open wheelers as well? And, what advice would you give to young parents or kids as well, looking to try and kind of bridge the gap and kind of find the kind of the financial lifeguard they sometimes need to be able to participate?
Yeah, I love talking about this because I like sharing all the ways that I didn't do it right. So hopefully it helps someone skip over those steps a little bit faster. So I would say the biggest things when you're approaching sponsorship is to really identify what your brand is and understand like who you are and what you want to represent, because that's going to decide what companies you approach, because you don't want to be a certain type and then you go and try and get a Victoria's Secret sponsorship when you're more of like a I don't know, like a Monster energy type person, like, you know what I'm saying, like that. You've got to be very strategic on which ones you approach, because at the end of the day they have to really like you and identify with you as a person and their brand. And if your why and your personality doesn't match up with their companies, it doesn't make sense for the relationship. And then as far as other things, I would just like easy things I started with is going to local businesses at first. They're very willing to, want to help the hometown story. And even if it's just small amounts at first, it can be super beneficial because you can kind of use those maybe as small travel funds, or you can use those actually to maybe even hire out services that you aren't like strong in yourself, whether that's like maybe getting website done or getting someone to help you make a great marketing deck, or maybe it's even for lawyer fees to help you shape up a contract when you get to contract. So I think those are big tips that will help you. But one thing that I think people don't, motorsport sponsorship is what you will be spending the majority of your time doing as a driver if you do not come from a place where there's a lot of financial support. So just be prepared that it's very easy to, like 2 days ago, I sat on my computer and didn't realize it, but I worked 8 hours straight on sponsorship stuff, and that is pretty normal for several days a week. So it's definitely takes the time, but it's what you got to do in order to be in the seat.
Absolutely, and great advice and kind of tips there as well, Sabra. And I know that you're being bashful there and kind of saying, well, these are things I got wrong. But I think, a lot of us in life as well, like learn from mistakes and kind of do things which, we wish we'd done differently. And for, the younger audience and even for the parents out there as well, it's so key hearing from a driver like yourself that's gone through it, gone through the motions, had the experience of doing it. And also, I think like what you said there as well is absolutely correct, and I think good for people to listen to as well, because some people might think that being a racing driver is just kind of learning, how fast can I take turn 3, can I double apex the chicane in 9 and 8 and stuff like this too. But actually it's a bigger responsibility. It's definitely a bigger project in terms of eulogizing so many different brands and marketing players as well, to get that together and to kind of have a strong financial package that enables you to participate in these different series as well. So I think that's really key, and thank you for elaborating on that too. Now, on a completely different subject, Sabra, we know that you're a huge IndyCar fan. Question is like, what have you made of the current season so far? Because you've only got 3 races left now. And who would you like to see win the championship this year?
Oh, the season's been really cool, I think. Like, it's been great to see some of the, the young guys challenging the older established guys, and just seeing like how the experienced guys really use that knowledge that they've built up to make a difference, like in uncertain situations, like Nashville. Dixon ended up winning because he's got so much experience. He knew what he needed to do. Everybody else was, making mistakes. There was lots of crashes, and was it going to rain? We weren't sure. And, he's the one that ended up getting it done when there is all kinds of uncertainties. So I don't know who's going to win. I kind of was like outside rooting for Pato because I've known him since he was a kid. So I wish that would happen. I'm not so sure if it's feasible at this point. But I guess I am a little bit rooting for Ericsson, just because one of my good friends, she is his engine engineer. So I think it would be really cool to win the championship. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens. But either way, I think we're gonna get some great racing in the next few races.
Oh, it's definitely been tasty. I absolutely agree with you on that, Sabre. And another kind of fantasy question I wanted to throw in there too, and I hope it's a fantasy that can someday become a reality too, because it'd be amazing to have you on the IndyCar grid too. Question is let's say you get the call up from Andretti Autosport or Chip Ganassi Racing, and they ask you to pick a teammate and a circuit to make your debut on. Who would you pick as your teammate, and what circuit would you pick for your debut race?
I would pick Scott Dixon because I would really want to learn from all of his experience. And as far as circuit, I don't know. That's a tough one. I mean, the dream is always to run the 500, right? So that would be pretty cool. But I kind of want to say Laguna Seca, just because that was the first car track that I ever drove. So like, if that was my first race, that would be a nice, like, full circle moment. And it's such a cool track anyways. So let's say that Scott Dixon and Laguna Seca.
Great choices there, Sabre. Honestly, like with Scott Dixon as well, like I don't think he gets spoken about enough. I know, like us based in Europe, IndyCar is kind of viewed kind of differently, and I guess the experience as well is different on this side of the pond as well. But for me personally, I really rate Scott Dixon so highly. He's now the second most winningest driver in the sport as well, just surpassing Mario Andretti at the weekend as well. And it doesn't look like he's going to stop anytime soon, Sabre. Like the debate me and my friend were having the other day was, and I'll put this question to you as well. Do you think that he will surpass AJ Foyt's record as well, to become like the all-time winningest driver in IndyCar?
Oh, I don't know. Well, how many races is he away from AJ Foyt?
Ooh, let me double check. I'll have a look right now as we speak. But just like he's been so amazing, and like you mentioned, his experience comes in clutch in so many different scenarios as well. So he's so like highly regarded, and when people are talking about the greatest like racing drivers of all time, I think he's definitely worth a shout as well.
Yeah,
Just having a
it's
look.
pretty amazing, his consistency and ability to just kind of adapt his program. Like when he lost the championship last year, and his teammate ended up clinching it, but this year, like, he's outperforming, or he's higher up in the points. So he always figures out a way to adjust his strategy. He doesn't kind of like get stuck in his, like, this is the way I drive. This is, he's very adaptable.
Absolutely. And whilst I'm just trying to get the statistics as well there, Sabre, because this is a factual podcast, and we like to get our facts correct because attention to detail is always key. You also mentioned, that you had like when you're younger kind of encounters with Pato Ward as well. Are you able at liberty to kind of share some of those? Because I'm a huge Pato fan, by the way, as well. So it's so kind of interesting to kind of learn about him and his nature as a person. He always seems quite funny, sometimes goofy at times as well, with
Very
the
goofy, yeah.
relationship he has with Rosenquist. Like, yeah, like what are your kind of experiences with him as like a person?
Well, so I'm a little bit older than him. So when we were racing karts, like I was in like the adult, the pro shifter class, and he was in like the I don't want to say the baby shifter class, but it's like the junior shifter class. And I just remember he got in one of the junior shifters and he like went right when he was able to, and he was so little, like he was so short. I just remember like first time I watched him race at Supernats, and it's S5 is the class, and he was like, it basically looked like he had the helmet was like just sticking out above the seat. It felt like because he was so tiny. But yeah, so I think like that's the image that I just always think of when I see him, and it's so strange now that he's all grown up. But yeah, he's doing a great job. He's always definitely been like a happy, quirky kid, and it's good to see him enjoying his time in IndyCar.
Oh, absolutely. And just that kind of family that you're surrounded by as well, being part of the McLaren Arrow SP team as well. It seems like those guys have a lot of fun. But when it comes to business as well, they're very serious and one of the sharpest like teams and driver combinations on the grid as well. So it's really intriguing. And actually, whilst we were doing that as well, Sabra, I managed to just get the statistics. So AJ Foyt is on 67 wins, and Scott Dixon, which I believe is 42 years old, is on 53 wins. So he's only about 14 wins away.
Oh, and he's has. Oh, I don't know. I feel like I hope he gets there, but I don't know. It's going to depend on how many years he sticks with it.
Exactly. But then I guess we could speak on this as well, Saber. Like, how impressive is it, like, to see just how long the kind of like the lifespan of drivers are in IndyCar and obviously open wheeler series these days too? Because even when we had Mario Andretti on the podcast earlier this year as well, I'm doing all the name dropping now. Like, it's just incredible just to kind of see just how long his career span was, and just to see how far drivers are going in Formula One, IndyCar, and all the other series too. Like, do you have any comments on that, or just like generally just how impressive that is?
Yeah, it's obviously super impressive, and sport as a whole is getting better because technology is getting better, and we're understanding more like how to train better, how to recover better. And so I think Scott is very good at working with Jim Leo at PitFit on how to optimize like his training, especially like as you get older. Like I've definitely noticed it's harder and harder to recover, and the fact that he's still doing it at his age and he's still like absolutely like on top is super impressive, because to bring yourself up as an athlete to that level of performance, not only physically but mentally, like for that many years of your life, is very, very hard. So the fact that he is still like bringing himself to that level, it's very impressive.
Absolutely. And Sabra, we're going to bring it back to you. You're an immensely talented and inspirational individual, and you inspire people like me and obviously loads of people around the world too that desire to have a blossoming career like yourself. Like, I know that we've kind of given a lot of tips and advice, and some of it's kind of been on the financial aspect of sponsorship. Some of it's just been in terms of conduct and how you go about kind of like, approaching different people. But just generally speaking as well, is there any bits of advice or anything you don't feel we have discussed that you definitely want to talk about? And again, you also mentioned that there are a few mistakes that you made on the way too. And we all make mistakes, we're all human. But again, was there anything else maybe that you do differently now that you've had time to reflect on it?
Oh, so many things, but that's always in hindsight, right? But
Exactly.
I guess I would say the thing like that I struggled with the most was figuring out a way to make the financial part happen. And it's still a struggle today. Like it is a day-to-day thing that you spend your time doing. So I guess for all the kids out there that, aren't coming from wealthy backgrounds, my biggest piece of advice that I didn't say earlier would be to find a way to just be there at the opportunities. So like show up to the race weekends. I don't care. Like, I know it's super hard like to get the money to travel there and a hotel. Like I'm not advising you to do this, and I'm not admitting that I've done it, but if you drive there, you can sleep in your car. It's not ideal, but most of the tracks in the US actually have showers at the track. So if you're there, you can meet teams. You never know who you're going to bump into with sponsorship, or maybe there's like drivers, that are now out of the sport and they're out mingling. Like, Lynn St. James is a great example for me. Like, she has connected me to some amazing people just because, I showed up, I was there, I tried to be present for the opportunities. So I think that is a really big piece of advice that, if you're stuck in a place and you're like, I don't know, the chicken before the egg problem, you need the money to get there, but you need the money to get the sponsorship, but you don't have the money to, you know what I'm saying? I can't even remember how to explain that, but the point is like, if you feel like you're stuck in a loop and you can't find a solution to the problem, if you just kind of have in mind of what your goals are, and then you start putting yourself in the places to make those goals happen, usually a solution will present itself, because whether you believe in manifestation or God or whoever, you're putting out that energy into the universe that you want this to happen, and you're taking the steps to make it happen. And usually you will get a return for that investment.
Absolutely, Saber, and I absolutely agree with you as well. A lot of people call it luck, or some people will say like being in the right place at the right time. But as you correctly said there as well, you have to put yourself in these positions. Sometimes you have to make a loss to make a win, and in other words as well, you have to be super resourceful and try and maximize the things you have to your advantage. Because there's so many. We look at our position and we say, oh well, we wish this was better, we wish this was different. But then, you look at other people across the world that are even less fortunate than us, and they've had to do more with less too, So I definitely think that's a key thing. And I absolutely agree with what you said as well. Having the right mentality and approach as well will always put you in the correct stead to progress and to make the right steps forward too. And yeah, just whatever you put in the world is what you get out usually, So if you make the sacrifices 9 times out of 10, they always pay off. And even if like something doesn't happen or it doesn't go the way you expect it to, don't beat yourself up, don't get too kind of dejected about it. Keep picking yourself up, and a door is bound to open somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, don't be afraid to make mistakes, because failure and mistakes is how we learn. And if we didn't make them, then we wouldn't know, if you just wanted everything, you wouldn't know what to do when things went wrong.
Exactly, Saber. And that's so true as well, like making mistakes kind of makes us put value on the journey, and kind of makes us realize, the kind of value in going through certain experiences, going through certain emotions, and it prepares us, in life for other things, and other challenges and obstacles we have to kind of face at some point as well. So I absolutely agree with you on that too, and I'm so glad you said it, because I think a lot of people still need to hear that. And to round this episode up as well, Saber, you've been an amazing guest. We definitely need to get you back on again later on in the year, when things calm down a bit, because I know you're doing a lot of racing and there's so much going on. So on the topic of which, Saber, like, what does the rest of the summer look like for you? Are there any projects or series you're participating in that us and the rest of your adoring fans can look forward to?
Well, so I got injured last year during the W Series season and had to have surgery almost exactly 5 months ago now. So rehab, unfortunately, for the hip surgery and my back is not cleared until actually next month. So I've not been in the driver's seat, mostly just working as an engineer and a coach. But
Sure.
as for the rest of the season, I will be working with Coretta Autosport again at the last race at Laguna Seca in IndyCar. And then I'll also be at the weekend here, coming up here in just a few weeks, at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, where they've got, all the sports cars coming to race, and I'll be with Kelly Moss there. So if anybody is around for those, I will be at those events. And then after that, there is another race at COTA that I'll be working for as an engineer. And hopefully after that, I will be announcing when I'll be getting back into a race car for the first time. But it all depends. It all hinges on my next doctor's appointment. So cross your fingers for me, and then watch out for the announcement of what my first race will be.
Oh, we'll say, bro, listen, we're all rooting for you. We're hoping that you have a great continued rehabilitation and that you're able to finally get clear to go racing, because that's the most exciting thing and kind of the cherry on top of the cake as well. But, you've been so amazing, and I'm so glad that we've had a meaningful and actually very honest conversation too, because there's so much that people can learn. I definitely learned so much from you. So, you've gained a new follower in me and the rest of the Stripping the Dipping Nation as well, as always. And on that note as well, Sabre, is there anything else that you want our listeners to know, and where can they find you in terms of the social media platforms as well?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And anybody out there that wants to find me on social media and connect, I'm under Sabre Cook Racing on Facebook. I'm under just Sabre Cook on Instagram, Sabre_Cook on Twitter, and just Sabre Cook on LinkedIn. And yeah, if any of you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Usually I'm pretty open to helping those that are trying to help themselves. So I really appreciate you guys having me on the show today. It was really great speaking with you.
Oh, anytime, Sabre. And again, like we mentioned earlier too, we definitely need to reinvite you again later on in the season, just to see how your rehabilitation's coming along, and this as well, just to chop it up on the IndyCar and all the other things happening around the world, because it's so exciting. But it's been amazing to have you, Sabre. You're a star, you're a legend in our eyes, and like I've taken so much inspiration from everything you've mentioned on today's podcast too. So super happy to have you on. We definitely need you on later this year, and I'm positive as well Georgina is going to put all of your social media links in the description as well when the video goes out as well. So guys listening, make sure that you follow Sabre, make sure that you share and like the video as well with friends of friends, because we're all trying to teach each other. And again, Sabre's been such an amazing guest. So we wish her all the best. We look forward to hearing from her again soon on the podcast. And that's been episode 6 of our summer series Shutdown. So it's been your usual co-host, AMG Dent, and I'm out. Peace.